If you're a parent, you may be wondering why other parents are so terribly concerned about this Common Core curriculum and why many teachers are concerned about it. If you are not currently a parent, maybe a grandparent, but not currently either one of those things, a parent or grandparent, you still ought to know what's going on because your taxes are supporting the schools, and this is what the kids will be learning henceforth unless there's a dramatic change. We have an expert on this today, not just someone who's ticked off, a real expert. Stay tuned.
Next on News Talk, AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show with Kevin Doran.
An expert, of course, is a guy from out of town with a briefcase. That's the definition of an expert in my business. But this gentleman is an expert. He's a sociologist. He's a professor at the Uville College in Buffalo, Dr. Mark Garrison. Dr. Garrison, and I may end up just calling you Prof. Dr. Garrison, what got you interested in this Common Core curriculum controversy? I like that, Common Core curriculum controversy. What got you interested in that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, and it's fine to call me Mark. The thing that really struck me, as many folks know, there's no constitutional provision for the federal government to be directly involved in education. The Constitution is silent on education. And although many folks have toyed with the idea of nationalized forms of education, most people don't know, as a side note here, that the first 6 presidents of the United States advocated for a national university. But anyway, when I first heard rumblings of serious movement towards a curriculum that would be sponsored by or supported by the federal government and national non-for-profit agencies, I immediately became interested because I think it's politically significant, meaning it suggested to me right off the bat that this was going to be a big move away from state control over education, which is often referred to sometimes as local control, although that's been slowly being whittled away at for the last 50, 60, 70 years, depending on when you want to start. But this arrangement from the very beginning suggested to me that there was going to be some significant political change, and that's what interested me. I've been studying standardized testing and how it's used in what's called education reform for the last 20 years. And I knew that standardized testing was going to be a big component of any national/federal curriculum.
So that's where your interest came. You're not, let me just put it in the vernacular, you're not ticked off as a parent or grandparent. You started off because you realize that there's something odd going on here if the federal government is going to have a nationalized curriculum. Have I got that right there? Have I got that right?
That's correct. I mean, Before anyone saw any standards, okay, before anyone saw what this was going to look like, there was talk about some form of national curriculum. Now, people use different ways. They talk about it being state-led, which largely isn't true. And so I wasn't really singularly focused on the curriculum or how it was going to affect schools. Now as a parent, now I am upset as a parent with what I see in my own children's schools and the schools that my friends and colleagues are attending. But that's not what originally sparked my interest. It was really, I'm very interested in studying the politics of education reform and always have been, and very sensitive to the way in which education reforms alter, in sometimes subtle ways, who decides, right? Mm-hmm. What role do parents have in governing schools? What role do teachers have in governing schools? What role do corporations have in governing schools? So I've always been interested in the who decides question of education.
Okay, I think I don't need to tell you, Mark. I will use your first name. I don't think I need to tell you that many so-called reforms throughout history have actually been deforms, deformations, if you will. So is that how you see this? Not just a threat to our freedom, but a real step, well, not even backward, just a really bad step, huh?
Well, I'm happy to hear you use the language of deform. Reform connotes something that is an improvement.
Yeah.
Okay? If you look up the word, it just means action that's taken to improve something. And the kind of action that the Common Core Standards Initiative is an outgrowth of is depending on who you talk to, a 20, 30-year initiative. We've been experiencing this kind of initiative for some time. And you could say that the Common Core Standards Initiative is the culmination of a lot of previous efforts. There's some differences, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of, the basic mechanisms of how the policy is to work. And I would definitely say that it's doing the opposite of improvement. It's lowering the quality of education. The long move we've had towards more and more high-stakes testing has decreased the quality of education, and so it's most certainly not an improvement, but actually degrading it. And it's not just going backwards. I mean, there's really some new and very dangerous elements to what we're seeing, not only in the political sphere in terms of governing, but also in terms of the way teaching and learning is being thought about.
All right, let's talk about those dangerous things, because obviously if they didn't exist, there wouldn't be so many people upset. What are the dangerous things you just referenced?
Well, the dangerous thing was the question of democracy. Let's put that aside for a second and talk about the teaching and learning. Underneath the philosophy of those who created the Common Core is a vision of education that's meant to narrowly prepare people as compliant workers. Right. So the vision of public education that I think many people, we might debate, but many people would say, public education is to support the development of the entire person, citizen, a member of the community, yes, someone who's productive in the community, and yes, someone who participates in politics, someone who's culturally knowledgeable and can participate and enjoy a variety of forms of cultural life, and someone who's just cultured and educated. Underlying the Common Core Standards is a vision of narrowing that aim to be a compliant worker. And one of the things that people don't really know is this phrase that's driving education reform, which is called data-driven decision-making. And the aim behind data-driven decision-making is to remove decision-making from the practice setting, that is the practitioners in the school, the principal, and the teachers, to be controlled by huge databases run by algorithms that basically codify elements of a human being, okay? This is what people are also upset about, the In-Bloom database. And using those data points to make decisions about the person from the point of view of what's called discrete skill. So the idea is that we prepare people such that their skills can be mined by big companies for their benefit, and this is why you see a concomitant elimination of things like arts, physical education, what's often erroneously called extracurricular activities, or even learning of foreign languages. Many schools are cutting all of that out so as they can respond to these mandates, in addition to just the general decline in resources that they're having access to. So the essence is that these the whole thing's premised on this notion of discrete skills, and human beings, in essence, here are treated like products. Right? So the leader of the Business Roundtable, John Engler, said in the New York Times that the products leave K through 12 education to go to the military, the corporations, or the colleges. And he openly talked about our students, our children, as products to be bought and sold on the open market. And that's the kind of education. It's sort of like a factory model.
Okay, now from all those things you said, which I must tell you, you put in very specific professional language. I'm going to try to break it down. But of all the things you said, the term compliant worker scares me the most.
Yeah, that's the essence of it.
Yeah. There are people, and I'm sure you know this better than I, who have maintained that since the early 1900s, government education has aimed at dumbing down the American student. Whether it aimed or not, it didn't matter. It worked. I think it was intentional, but it certainly worked. Now they want to go one step further, and I want to get back to this whole concept of compliant worker. Then, Dr. Mark Garrison de Yuval, I want to ask you for some specific examples. Being a simple soul, I work better in examples than I do in concepts, and I think probably a lot of people do. So we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Hi, this is George Preet, Democratic Party Chairman for the town of Hornellsville, which includes the villages of Arkport and North Hornell. I am asking you to vote on Election Day for Robert Morrow for Town Councilman. Robert is an independent thinker with an inquisitive mind who is not afraid to speak out. Thank you.
This is Robert Morrow, and I approve of this message.
Now, back to the Newsmaker Show with Kevin Doran on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA.
Dr. Mark Garrison is with us. He will be speaking at Alfred in the Village Hall. Right, I was just reminded. The Village Hall, Thursday evening. We'll have more about the exact time and so forth later on. Dr. Mark Garrison, professor at the UVille, and I understand you've been working with some locally, well, I wouldn't say just local, but concerned parents in this area and concerned teachers. A lot of teachers are very upset about this.
Yeah, and they're trying to keep that quiet, by the way. A lot of teachers are under a position where they're afraid to speak out. Superintendents and school boards are telling their teachers that they're absolutely not to talk to parents. And then they're being told that they're... No, I'm not kidding. Teachers are forced to sign a waiver when they grade the state test that they're legally... they could lose their license if they talk to parents about what was on the test. Pearson, the company that makes the tests, has basically a gag order. By the way, when students take the SAT, they're also signing a waiver. They're never allowed to talk about what they experienced on the test.
Is this America or some Bilderberger version of the same, huh?
Well, the test secrecy, which is not unrelated to the common... Let's just back up real quick. Everything that we're dealing with is really what's called the college and career-ready agenda. Mm-hmm. So the Common Core is part of the college-ready, career-ready agenda. And that's the whole overarching framework for what we're seeing. That includes the big databases that secretly control our families. Okay, it's not just the kids. It's stuff about their parents. It's stuff about the teachers, too. People don't understand that the teachers' data is going into the big databases. And districts are pulling out of that in New York State. So there's the big data. There's the curriculum, which is aligned to these Common Core standards. There's the increased onerous testing requirements with high stakes attached to them. So this whole thing is an outlook. It isn't merely a bad policy idea. It's definitely a very conscious plan that's been worked out over many years.
All right,
and then the financial crisis was used as a means to essentially bribe states into adopting it. The states themselves weren't involved in any of this in any meaningful way. I mean, I'm sure some state executive folks were part of it, but in terms of state legislatures or even folks on the the representatives of the state were not involved, and that includes the testing secrecy. There's a bill that hasn't been actually floored on dealing with test secrecy and data secrecy.
All right, let's talk about some of these frightening examples that kids are getting stuck with. And you're going to send some of them to me, and we're going to put them up on our website. But right now, go ahead. Tell me some of the horror stories.
There was this discussion of physical education. So a simple horror story is that everyone knows that physical education activities are important for the full development of a person, and that these physical education activities provide a lot of opportunities for a wide variety of things that aren't strictly academic. Because of the testing requirements in the Common Core and the way the state is organizing the annual professional performance review of teachers, students are being asked to fill out bubble sheets picking out a basketball or a football as opposed to playing with a football. Okay? And teachers are being evaluated in physical education based on how well the student does on the English language arts exam. So that's one example. The other example is that here's what's complicated, is that the rhetoric suggests that the Common Core standards are actually asking more of students, that they're at a higher level, okay? And then the state and Pearson established an exam cut score so that the vast majority of students were labeled as failing to meet these career and college-ready standards. Now, what's hard to understand is that you actually can lower the level of education by making the test harder. So what you're starting to see is exam questions that are arbitrary, not connected in a coherent way to a whole curriculum, right? The English language arts exam, for example, that's tied to the Common Core, and I had a chance to see some of the state's test prep booklets where were not curriculum-based questions, but basically you would read these strange passages. So although the teachers weren't allowed to talk about what was on the test, I did off the record, without noting their name, interview some teachers. And here's the one story I'll tell you, and I think it'll resonate with you. There was one passage for, I think it was 4th or 5th grade, and the passage described an animal who was jealous that another animal could fly. And the moral of the story was that you shouldn't strive to go beyond your strata or social class, that you should accept where you are in the society. And that's what she interpreted from the question. We couldn't see the question, obviously, because you're not allowed to. Another example that I'm going to send you a link of is a first grade math question. And this question is preparing the students for the Common Core exams. Okay, there's no test in first grade, but schools are under pressure to get kids ready by the time they're in 3rd grade when the testing now begins. And the question asks the student about a cup being full, and then the student's supposed to identify that one of the pennies is missing from the cup. And the question is written in such a way where it's actually nonsensical. I mean, my son's 16 and in a private preparatory school and thought the question was absurd. My wife thought the question was absurd. My 11-year-old daughter didn't understand the question, what do the pennies have to do with the cup? Okay, so there's a lot of tricky questions which are hard, okay, but they're actually kind of irrational. And what people don't often understand, and you can read about this in the link I'm going to send you, is that the Common Core standards were developed backwards, meaning that these secret committees decided this is what, by the time someone leaves high school, they should know and be able to do. And then they just said, we're going to backtrack it or reverse engineer it from 12th grade to 11th grade, 11th grade to 10th grade, and so on, in the way you would a production line, right? The end result is the car, so then how do we build the car? Well, we back up. And then the first component of building the car is, we dig the metal ore, and then we melt it down and so on. So this is the way they backtrack what are called the Common Core learning standards to the first grade. And when you get this backed up all the way down there, you get these really bizarre questions that ask you to figure out the relationship between how many pennies you have and the cup being full.
I can't imagine what they're asking in history, if in fact they do ask anything in history.
Well, history's, you have to understand that history is being largely, as it has been for some time, largely eliminated. I mean, I'll try and say this, when you eliminate history from the curriculum, you're eliminating collective memory, and collective memory is very important for a people to have an active participation in their society.
I've been told by one parent, very concerned parent, that these kids are being told that they are citizens of the world, not the United States, but of the world, and that they should look to the United Nations, not the American Constitution, for the solution to all problems.
Right,
is that true?
I don't know. I don't know what curriculum module that comes from, because most of the content is that what you would see that as English language arts. Now, I do know that they read. So there's several issues here. Students are asked to read the Declaration of Human Rights at a time. Okay, so if you read that document, it's not written for primary grades.
That's a UN document, right?
Correct. That's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It sounds to me, I'm not, believe me, I'm not into a conspiracy on this. I do think there are some conspiracies, and if this isn't, I don't know what is, but it sounds to me like it's a brainwashing attempt to produce people the way you might produce a product. Behind it is the idea that there's so many things here, and hopefully folks will come out and I can lay it out because I'll have more time. But part of the psychology, much of the psychology that's underneath this is called radical behaviorism. And radical behaviorism postulates that humans have no will, no free will, and no agency, that they're merely responding to stimulus of punishment and reward. I don't believe that. Do you believe that?
No, of course not. I mean,
but the kids are being told that's what the story is, huh?
Well, it's kind of interesting, right? They're told they're being encouraged to do critical thinking activities, but the way those critical thinking activities are in the same way a kid gets addicted to a computer game. right?
Listen, Mark, our time is gone. I hate to say that, but you're going to be in Alfred at the Village Hall Thursday evening. We're going to promote it on the air. There's another meeting tonight, I understand, somewhere. We're talking about that on the air so people can learn more about, let's be honest, this monstrosity. And when you tell me that teachers are being threatened with their license for publicly complaining about this, that's so damn un-American that it makes me just furious.
It's the test secrecy and the gagging of teachers is probably the single most important thing that people don't know widely, and it should be militantly opposed.
Absolutely. And Mobil Oil is promoting this on television. I understand that Melinda and Bill Gates, those wonderful people.
Do you know how much they spent on the Career and College Ready agenda? $1.5 billion since 2009.
Yeah. Beautiful. Isn't that
Not
nice?
$150 million. That's just the Common Core. The whole college and career agenda, $1.5 billion.
Yeah. Well, maybe someone better look into what they're up to, huh? Okay, thanks an awful lot, Dr. Mark Garrison, and we'll be telling people again about this meeting coming up Thursday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mark Garrison, a professor at the UVille College in Buffalo, and I recognize that a lot of the way he talked is not the way you and I might talk. What infuriates you and me is terms like compliant workers. They're trying to produce compliant workers. No wonder Bill Gates is behind it. $1.5 billion. He's also, of course, a big contributor, he and his wife, to Planned Parenthood. You may think that's good or bad, but all these things are control things going on between the government and big organizations. ExxonMobil spending millions of dollars in ads promoting this on television and attacking people who are against it. Well, if you're upset, you're not alone. Question is, what can we do about it? And I'm sure that will come up at these meetings tonight and again Thursday. And we'll keep you posted. And we'll have more people back on the air about this. Because this, if you don't believe me when I say it's dangerous, you're not thinking. This is very dangerous.